The people of medieval Europe called it the Great Pestilence. A terrifying and bewildering sickness from the east which brought delirium and an agonizing death. Fear and hysteria gripped the land, and as the death toll mounted, it became apparent that no one was safe and no one could offer protection. As the sickness raced across Europe, communities struggled simply to bury their dead. And they sought answers, someone to blame, or a means to appease God's wrath. This was the Black Death, the greatest biological disaster in the history of mankind. To those engulfed by the madness and death, it seemed the end of the world. At the dawn of the 14th century, medieval Europe is riding a long streak of prosperity.
Europe has had 3, maybe 4 centuries of really good times. The church has been strong, various kingdoms have been strong, trade has grown, cities have grown, industry has grown, there haven't been any natural catastrophes, weather's been nice, population's been growing. It's really been a nice time for Europe.
But unknowingly, Europe stands on the brink of its greatest crisis. Suddenly, there is a subtle shift in the climate as temperatures fall. Europe's overstretched resources fail. There is famine and war. The Golden Age has ended, and a more dreadful reality confronts the continent.
The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse have come. Famine hits, plague hits, war is all over, and death is all over.
In the 1340s, war ravages the continent. Edward III has ruled England for 20 years. Now he seeks to enforce his claim on the throne of France and leads an army into Normandy. He wins a spectacular victory at Crécy before wresting control of Calais from his rival, Philip VI of France. Edward controls a sizable portion of France, but his early advantage will only lead to a protracted war.
This is the beginning of the 100 Years' War, and which is really a world war as far as the Europeans are concerned. It involves everywhere: Spain, Germany, Italy, France, England.
Far to the east, on the Mongolian steppes, something terrible has awakened, an invisible agent of death. Rumors fly that all of humanity is being wiped out in China, India, and the Islamic world. Before 1347, the Mongols seemed unstoppable. Their dominion over the East has lasted nearly 150 years in an empire stretching from the peaks of Tibet to beyond the Volga River and from Beijing to Constantinople. But as new opportunities are created for trade, at the same time Europe is opened up to new, unforeseen dangers.
We have very valuable goods and cargo such as spices and silk passing along this overland route opened up by the Mongols through their unified empire. But of course another commodity would have been plague.
And in the towns, ships from the Black Sea sail into harbor, bring something foul. Below decks, the Italians find a cargo of corpses. When the townspeople realize the danger, they order the ships to leave their harbor, but it is too late. The plague has already taken hold. The first signs of the sickness seem like many common illnesses. They give little indication of the horror that is to come.
It's spread can be very, very rapid. It can cause septic shock. Your blood pressure will drop very rapidly. See multi-organ failure. The vascular system can become leaky and you can have hemorrhaging. The buboes themselves are very, very painful. It's a very awful way to die.
It spreads quickly within families, sowing terror in every quarter. But this is just the beginning. Genoese ships from Kaffa and Constantinople are landing on the Italian mainland. They bear furs, textiles, and rats. Gabriele de Musis, an Italian notary who lives through the dark days that follow, gives voice to the horror of the sailors who have unwittingly brought the catastrophe home.
To our anguish, we were carrying the darts of death. We were spreading a poison from our lips even as we spoke.
Venetians are dying at the astonishing rate of 600 a day. In September 1347, the plague enters France through ships trading at Marseille. Merchant ships carrying the infection sail to Spain. In Barcelona, about 60% of the population is thought to have perished. In spring, the Black Death travels up the Rhone River to Avignon, where the Pope resides. Clement VI refuses to leave his palace. By August 1348, the plague reaches Paris. Half its population will die. The pestilence seems to strike at random, wiping out some households but sparing others. Even before it sows destruction, it breeds terror. Consumed by fear, many of the gentry flee, leaving the less fortunate to fend for themselves. In England, Edward III and his eldest son retreat to a country estate, bolting the gates behind them. But there's no such refuge for the serfs who farm the land. It was in the villages that mortality was at its highest, and the peasants died in droves. As conditions worsen, the church seems to fail its flock. Fearing contamination, some priests refuse to administer last rites to the dying. For many medieval people, to die without last rites is a more terrifying prospect than death itself. As one of the great writers of the age, Giovanni Boccaccio, witnesses.
Relatives were cared for, not otherwise than dogs. They threw them their food and drink by the bed, and then they fled the household.
The lack of compassion appalls Agnolo di Tura, a citizen of Siena.
Father abandoned child, wife, husband, one brother, another. For this illness seemed to strike through breath and sight. And so they died.
The death rates were so high that basically people's faith was shocked or rocked to the core. Many of the teachings they'd been given by the church didn't seem to give them any comfort or seem to be applicable to the situation. Everyone was dying. It didn't seem to make any sense.
The fabric of medieval society is being torn apart. People begin to turn to extremists for answers.
This was God's vengeance on humans for their wickedness and sin.
By 1348, the Black Death has traveled from Sicily to England, carried in trade ships aboard the backs of rats. Already it has claimed the lives of millions. At every farm, the corpses pile up in staggering numbers. Communities face a new crisis: how to dispose of the dead.
If you lose 10% of 95,000 people, that's 10,000 people. How do you bury 10,000 people that have been lost in a very short period of time?
All the traditional elites of medieval Europe, church and secular, appear powerless. In 1348, as the plague engulfs Europe, mankind adds his own brand of viciousness to the disaster that surrounds him. Shock gives way to a witch hunt. Someone must be responsible for this catastrophe, and they should pay. In a torrent of hysteria and fear, the crowds target the defenseless and innocent. In 1348, the Black Death is at its height. It has cut a path of destruction from Sicily to England.
It's human nature, I suppose, to look for a scapegoat in times of crisis. Jews always seem to be the scapegoat, and in the Black Death they were as well.
According to French monk and eyewitness Jean de Venette,
the infection and the sudden death which it brought were blamed on the Jews, who were said to have poisoned wells and rivers and corrupted the air.
They were forced to confess that no Jews are innocent. All Jews are guilty. They're all part of this conspiracy. No one can be cleared of these charges.
De Venette reports that confessions like Agimet's fly up and down the Rhine.
Accordingly, the whole world brutally rose against them. Communities, many thousands were indiscriminately butchered, slaughtered, and burnt alive by the Christians.
As Pope Clement VI pointed out at the time, Jews were dying in equal number to Christians, so it was fantastical to argue that Jews were poisoning people during the Black Death.
The Pope's pleas fall on deaf ears. On St. Valentine's Day, 1349, the citizens of Strasbourg round up as many as 2,000 Jews and burn them in the Jewish cemetery. The atrocity is repeated in more than 15 cities in Germany and Switzerland. The people of Europe have been poisoned, not by some insidious Jewish plot, but by fear, hate, and ignorance. In the winter of 1349, the plague pushes north to the Scandinavian peninsula. By the time it reaches Russia 2 years later, the crisis is over in France. After wiping out around half the population of Europe, the pandemic is fitfully receding. The magnitude of the final death toll is so vast that it strains the human imagination. Monasteries in particular have been devastated. 60% of Venice has been killed by the epidemic. In Avignon, half of the citizens are dead. England is thought to have lost nearly 2 million people, almost half its population. But Edward III, King of England, survives, as do most nobles who have taken shelter on secluded country estates.
There's a somewhat lesser death rate among the upper classes, partly because they could move.
With only a basic grasp of medical science and hampered by religion and superstition, medieval physicians like Guy de Chauliac are hopelessly unprepared for the Black Death. Many experts fear that when confronted with a catastrophic pandemic, modern science will be equally overwhelmed.